All right, Shervin, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was good to have you here. We were talking a little bit about Greece before we started, and actually, this is kind of an interesting topic with Greece because we're going to talk about Stoicism. So, can you give us overview for people who don't know much about it, kind of how it started so many thousands of years ago?
Yeah, so Stoicism is a Hellenistic philosophy that was started in ancient Greece. It was started in 300 BC, I believe, by Zeno, and it's a philosophy more about managing your emotions and going through life. There is the older writings about it have philosophy about metaphysics and physics, but most people they know it mostly as the ethics part of the Stoicism is how to manage your life, how to be a good person, and stuff like that.
That's awesome. Those sound like amazing things. I work with a lot of people on their emotions.
Hmm.
So this is really helpful. I think one of the most important things people can do is manage their emotions and control them in different situations. So how did you get started in Stoicism? What prompted you? Was it a certain event or you picked up a book and just started being fascinated by it? How did this happen?
Um, so I used to struggle a lot with overthinking and thinking thinking my thoughts are out of my control a lot of times. And I kind of just searched up online how to stop overthinking, how to deal with emotions better. And I found some Stoic quotes, which were actually really helpful to make me realize that my thoughts are in my control. And what I can control is my mind. I can't control the outside events. So that's the main theme of and teaching of Stoicism is that you cannot control outside events, but you can control your emotions, your response to them. So that's what was really helpful to me. And then I started reading Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and I just looking up quotes and seeing what's helpful. Yeah.
Cool. So the things that we can control inside of us, what are some of these things that you would say we actually can have control over inside of us?
So I'd say Stoicism is very old. It's an ancient philosophy. So they didn't know much about psychology. So it's not like you can just control clinical depression and just like tell it to go away. But a lot of times when you have responses to things. So, for example, throughout my daily life, I might encounter someone who's a little bit irritating, but I can choose to, in that moment, respond harshly, or I can hold back this response. And you're not even like most people when they get angry afterwards, they're just thinking about it. They're like, oh, I should have said this. Oh my goodness, this person is so irritating. But what Stoicism makes you realize is like, why? One of Marcus Aurelius's quotes is constantly ask yourself, is this necessary? And every time I start getting angry, every time I start gossiping about someone behind their back, I'm like, is this necessary? This is not necessary. This is not helping me in my daily life. Um, so that's one of the important things that you can learn to apply to your daily life is to realize that just back talking and being angry at someone when it's not even necessary is a good option.
That's amazing, that quote, because I would guess most of the time when you ask yourself that question, the answer is probably no. Is that
Yeah,
safe to assume?
yeah.
Okay, so as far as you're controlling then your internal world and some of the things I teach, it's obviously once we have good control of this, our outer world actually, becomes much better. And we
Mhm.
probably don't see all these people being angry or what irritating us or things like this anymore. So what are some of the things besides, other people that we can't control in the external world that people should maybe look out for and not be, hey, this is necessary? Is there anything else?
Mhm. The things we can control?
Can't control, like the things
Oh,
outside
cannot.
of us.
Um, well, yeah, you have other people. Then you have like events that happen. So you have what's happening like with inflation in the US, or you have economic changes or natural disasters and stuff like that. And it's not going to help you to have a mindset to think that you do have it in your control.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned the word mindset. Is this how some people look at stoicism, or is it kind of much more than just a way of thinking and kind of like that?
I think so it's a mindset that you can apply to certain things. It's not like you can have it all the time. Obviously, since this was an ancient philosophy, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you just cannot apply to today's life. Um, so I think as a mindset, it's really you're picking and choosing what parts of it you want to use in your daily life. Yeah.
And so, what's one of the things that you would recommend if someone hasn't heard of stoicism before or this ancient philosophy?
Mhm.
What's something that you would say, "Hey, pick this part of it. I've seen results with it, or you've seen other people have results with it
Mhm.
that would help them."
Yeah. Um, I'd recommend the book Marcus Aurelius Meditations. That one is probably the most popular, and for good reason because it's basically Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor's journal that he had for himself, and he was very influenced by Stoicism. So he was writing down all his thoughts, and throughout this journal, you can, since it's a very personal journal, you can kind of, I mean, he was an emperor, but you can still kind of relate to some of the things that he says, like dealing with people that are irritating or sadness that comes into your life, the loss of things in your life. Um, I'd recommend starting with Marcus Aurelius' meditations because they're the most understandable, um, and then the most applicable to daily life.
And so the this book then it's mostly his thoughts over time. You said it's a journal. Is this kind of the format it's in?
Y-
What should
Yeah,
someone expect?
yeah, the format is more of a it's him talking to himself basically. So you can read it and it says like constantly ask thyself this, and then you can like see the lesson that he's trying to talk to himself about. Um, it's not really a book that's like trying to teach anyone anything. In his when he was writing it, he was just writing it as a journal, his own thoughts. Yeah,
That's super cool that it's stood the test of time
yeah.
like that. So when he's writing something like this and he's telling himself like this, I kind of look at it as maybe that's sort of like installing a habit. Is there
Hmm.
anything in Stoicism that talks about, habits? And I know you said it's ancient, so not everything is applicable today, but is there anything in there that talks about like forming habits or keeping good habits and things like this?
Yeah. I'm not sure about a Marcus Aurelius quote, but Epictetus has a quote that says, if you want to do something, make a habit of it. If you don't want to do something, don't. But make a habit of something else instead. So it's they do preach a lot that if you want to stay consistent in some kind of characteristic in your life and some kind of goal in your life, make sure you make a habit of it.
Awesome. That totally
Yeah.
answers the question. So a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they may just be starting out in business or have a business. So what is something that from Stoicism that really stands in your out in your mind that could really help someone kind of boost their business or take it to the next level?
Yeah. So there's like five main things that I've really seen in Stoicism that can help us in our daily life and in the business world. Um, One of them is having a well-defined goal. So whenever you have a business, whenever you have a project, a goal, you want to make sure it's defined well. You don't want it to be some vague thing like, oh, I want to just have a successful business. I want to make this amount of money in this amount of time. I want to have this amount of workers. You want to have a very well-defined goal that will motivate you to work harder and stay more consistent and orient your decisions towards that goal. Um, it can also help you think more long term about what you want for your business because a lot of times it can be say you're some kind of influencer and you get a sponsorship and that will give you very short term gain, but what do you want in the long term? You have to think about the well-defined goal in the long term. Yeah.
Okay, that actually, I was reading a book on Stoicism at some point, and they talk a lot about, of course, like when we're setting goals, we're looking into the future, but they
Hmm.
talk a lot about like staying grounded in the
Hmm.
present moment, I believe.
Yeah.
So can you kind of talk about the importance of that, even if you're setting goals, to also stay really grounded in what's happening in the here and now and not kind of worry about the future and the past so much?
Yeah. Yeah, that's also a huge teaching in Stoicism is um, make sure your thoughts are in the here and now because you can't, again, the future is something you can't control. Just like the economy, just like the something outside your control, the future is something you can't control again. So make sure you're orienting your thoughts on what you can control in the present, but using the present influence the future.
Super cool.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Okay, so someone, let's say, has a really well-defined goal.
Hmm.
They're working away at this. What's something else that you've seen from Stoicism that can kind of help with business? And I really like how you had the quote, so I'm sure you have more of those as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so with Stoicism, you can really see a theme of being resilient when faced with challenges. Um, it's who was it? I think it was Epictetus. Epictetus said there's this kind of example going around where it shows that you don't actually own anything. You can think of it as being uh, borrowed because of circumstance. Because when you have that mindset, then when you lose something, then you can just say, look, it's given back. I had it borrowed. It wasn't mine. It was because of the circumstance that I had it. So by having that mindset, you can really quickly adapt to the situation because you're not sitting there groveling about what you've lost. You can quickly look at the circumstance, say, look, I this thing was borrowed and it's gone now. So let's continue. Let's be resilient. Yeah.
Cool. That's super interesting. One of the
Hmm.
things that I teach is there's no failure, there's only feedback. So when something is borrowed and someone loses it, would you also kind of say that goes along with like getting feedback and stuff like this as well? That's kind of where my mind went, at least. Do you see
Hmm.
any of that correlation there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you do lose something, then you can see a lot of times you can learn from it. You can learn from why it was taken away from you, and you can the next time that you're given something, you can take better care of it. So yeah, yeah,
Cool. I'm gonna start thinking like that. That was really
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Because I always think about it too, like people they have simple worries of, making money and things like this, of course. However, the only thing that's not, let's say, infinite that we have in this life, at least, is time. So we can always
yeah,
make more money or get something else. So even if we look at it, oh, hey, that was borrowed, we can always get more anyway. It
yeah,
looks fine. So what's something else that someone can apply to their business? I know you said you had about five things. So I think we did two so
yeah.
far. So what's the third one?
Um, so the third one is staying consistent. We talked about that earlier. If you want to reach a goal, you definitely got to stay consistent. You got to make a habit of it. If you have a business and you're working towards uh, building that business, you gotta have a schedule. You gotta wake up at a certain time. You gotta keep things consistent so you can actually make long-term progress. It's kind of like going to the gym too. It kind of applies to that. Is consistency always beats the guy who's consistent always beats the guy that goes to the gym twice a week and does super hard workouts. So yeah.
So I'm just trying to think as you're talking about this, how was like consistency, how were people doing this, let's say over 2000 years ago? Do we have any like evidence of things they were doing, or is it more like the quotes and things that they were kind of philosophizing about?
Hmm. Well, I mean, throughout human history, all humans have had some kind of goal. You know, the Egyptians built the pyramids. The Romans built their whole city. You know, Rome wasn't built in one day. It was consistency that really built it. So I think throughout human history, even the Roman emperors, they all had goals. Like even if they wanted to like conquer other nations, they had to be consistent in their pushes against the armies or something like that. So whenever there was a goal, there was some kind of consistency involved.
Super good answer. Because I wouldn't have thought of that like right off the bat. So what is the fourth thing that someone can do to really, help their personal life and business? Because I think people listening, obviously, like you said, these can be applied to business, but really, I think if we want our business to grow, we have to grow, or else it's, not going to just grow on its own. It starts from
Yeah.
within us as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, so the fourth thing is you have to be really flexible with your mindset. You have to change based on what the situation is. So I think that's actually really applicable to the business aspect as well as the personal aspect because even in personal life, you don't want to have beliefs that you just will not change. You're not willing to change it at all. Um, so even in business, when someone has um, some kind of mindset about how their business should be going. I This is a silly example, but Kitchen Nightmares, a lot of the people in there, when you're watching him, Gordon Ramsay trying to help them, they're stuck in their ways. They're like, "Oh, this is how I used to make it 70 years ago." Sure, it worked 70 years ago, but these dishes aren't going to work now. So that's how it is with business. And one of the quotes that Marcus Aurelius says is, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one has ever truly harmed. It is the person who continues in his self-deception and ignorance who is harmed. Yeah.
that's awesome. No, one of the things I teach in my training is flexibility of
Hmm.
behavior because the way we teach it, we say the person with the most flexibility of behavior actually controls the conversation or the system or anything like this because they're able to adapt to anything
Hmm.
that's going on. So, Gordon Ramsay, in your example, he's the most flexible. So, this is why he has success because he takes on different thinking as opposed to the person who wants to just make the same thing the same way. So what's the next one that you have there?
So the fourth one, or sorry, the fifth one is being grateful for the progress they made so far. A lot of times in the business world, you can just get it's good to be focused on a goal. It's good to be focused on the next step, but that'll just burn you out because then you're constantly thinking, oh, I'm behind. Oh, all the work I did is not enough. Then you just get burnt out because there's no actual reward in what you're doing. And like, what's the point if there's no reward? You're not going to continue. So you really have to be grateful for what you have so far and what you've achieved so far. Epicurus says, "Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Remember that what you now have was once among the things that you only hoped for." Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people when they have a business in their, let's say 1 year, 2 years in, they were hoping that they made all this progress when they first started. So it's a really good thing to think about. Because even
Yeah.
me, the things I'm doing now, I would have been, they would have just been an idea, let's
Yeah.
say 3, 4, 5 years ago or something. So those are really helpful in business. Thanks for those. One of the
Mhm.
things that popped in my mind though while you were speaking that I think I've read in Stoicism books, you can correct me if I'm
Mhm.
wrong. It's a totally different way of thinking besides the business stuff. They talk a lot about, um, not, I don't know, a lot. However, there's a point that kind of makes like death isn't kind of a big issue or something like this. That's probably not how they say it. It's more just like maybe the grateful thing got it with me. Can you explain how they think of that? So because it's really interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a quote by Epicurus. He says, "Death does not concern us because we're no longer alive to be concerned when we're dead." So, like, it's another thing I hear is, look, I was dead 1 billion years ago before I was born. It wasn't concerning me. It wasn't scary. It wasn't an issue. So the same thing will happen after I'm dead. So that's really their viewpoint on it is that not a concern because first of all, you can't control it. One of the principal things, you can't control death. So death will come at whatever point, and you shouldn't be concerned about it because you're not going to be alive to be concerned about it.
So when we're living, is there
Mhm.
anything that we should be concerned about? Is there anything that like we should absolutely concern ourselves with?
Um, Concerning ourselves with learning as much as we can and improving in whatever we think our purpose in life is. Whatever purpose we make for ourselves in our life, whether it be your business, your personal growth, whatever it is, being able to examine ourselves and learn. This is in Stoicism. Socrates says that an unexamined life is not worth living. So we should be willing to examine our life and learn throughout our life. Yeah.
So a lot of the people in Stoicism, they kind of pass down this knowledge. It
hmm
sounds like they had various teachers or mentors and stuff like this. So is this kind of maybe where mentoring and stuff like this maybe originated with these teachings, would you
Oh
say, or how
yeah.
did they look at this?
Yeah, yeah. So ancient Greece, mentoring and teaching is a huge, huge thing. Whether it be Stoicism from when it was like Zeno's writings getting passed down to Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, um, or even outside of Stoicism was Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. These three very great thinkers were all taught by one another. So Socrates was the first one, and then he taught Plato, and Plato learned, and then Aristotle learned from Plato. So yeah, mentoring was a huge thing in the Greek world. Yeah.
No, that's super cool because these are things I'm just thinking about as you're, talking about them. So of all these people that are involved in Stoicism, you shared a little bit about like what's, a book and stuff for people to get
hmm
started. Do you have like a favorite philosopher that you're like, oh, they're the best? Do you like
hmm
them all kind of the same? Or is there, someone that
Um,
you really like more than the others for whatever reason?
hmm. I'd say I like um, I like Epicurus a lot because of the fact that he's also in the skeptical realm of thinking. So that's another like Hellenistic kind of mindset that was created during the ancient Roman era was being very skeptical and questioning things. And Epicurus questions a lot of things. And on my channel, I talk about religion a lot, and religion makes a lot of claims, and I'm very skeptical about that. And I really connect with Epicurus on that point. He's also very skeptical about the claims that are made about the world by religions. Yeah.
So when you're saying question everything, what is kind of this process? You're just like, hey, I need to see more proof before I believe something. Do you ask yourself questions? Do you do research? Like, how does that kind of fit into the whole process of, being skeptical?
hmm Yeah. So most of the time when a claim is made, no matter what, it could be a scientific claim, you got to question, okay, what is the evidence for this? Is it supported by consensus? So is it supported by uh, a majority of people? Um, does it connect with what we know about the real world? Um, that's one of the big things. And it's more about not taking things as a fact as soon as you hear them because you think if someone has a PhD or someone has a master's degree or something like that. You're like, oh, they're smarter than me, so they must know what they're talking about. Whenever I'm listening to scientists or I'm gonna be a biology major, so I love all things biology. Whenever I'm listening to any biologist talk about something, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna go search it up and actually learn about it instead of just putting it in my brain and then when someone else talks about it, I'm like, oh, did you actually know this without me having to check it? Yeah.
That's interesting. The other thing you mentioned is, them not just believing someone because they have a title and things like this. and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Stoics, they didn't really have any like, classes of
Mhm.
people or anything in any sort of hierarchy? Weren't it just like, hey, we have this knowledge and whoever wants to be a part of it can learn it? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. So the Stoics, there was classes in the society, so you had emperors and you had people going down like the hierarchy, but knowledge was for everyone. Anyone. So when when Plato established the School of Athens for people to come and gather and philosophize and think about the world, it was all kinds of people. It was all kinds of people from any rank, and knowledge just gets passed around and shared. It's not some kind of thing that's secured to us to a hierarchy. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we covered some really good stuff here. So thanks for coming on the show. I know you said that
Yeah.
you have a YouTube channel. So if you want to share that information here, along with, anything else where people can find you and just a little bit about what you do, if you want to plug that now.
Yeah. So my YouTube channel on YouTube is called Shared Philosophy. I talk about religion, philosophy, just different aspects of thinking critically and having different perspective. The goal for that channel is really to provide a different perspective for people, because a lot of times I see people, even myself, I used to be in a complete echo chamber and I didn't see other perspectives, and I thought my perspective is the right one and that's it. So that channel is really to provide other perspectives for people. Yeah. So it's Shared Philosophy on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes so people have it. So if they want to go there and listen, and that's where I actually found you. I was on YouTube and your videos popped up, and I started watching them. So I'm glad we were able to connect on this. It's some really good philosophy and just concepts and ways of thinking. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.